By way of background, I was a journalist, just like all of you were, and my last real job was at CBS News. I was a producer for the network, which was a pretty good job at the age of 30, and I quit. I quit because I felt that television news was not taking me where I wanted to go as a journalist. And I always had a great fascination and passion for print journalists and newspapers, even though I hadn't elected to go there. So I wanted to see if I could make television the way a print journalist works. The problem with the television journalists, those of you in the TV business know, is you have so much equipment and it's so expensive and so complicated, you can't really get anything done. Cameraman, soundman, producer, edit the thing, fly over, book the place, hotels, it doesn't really work. So in 1988, I quit CBS and I bought myself a small home video camera, at that time state-of-the-art technology, which was SVHS. And I went to live in a Palestinian refugee camp in the Gaza Strip for a month during the first Intifada. And I moved in with a family, and I filmed every day. Now, for a print journalist, this wouldn't be that unusual, but for television, it's very rare, because when I worked for CBS, and we used to do the Middle East, we used to fly in, get the Israeli crew, go down, do some stand-ups, do some interviews, shoot some B-roll, and go home. So working in this way, I was able to get much better stuff, and I came back to the United States after a month, and I sold 2 pieces to the McNeil Lehrer NewsHour, which is the PBS nightly station like BBC. And I sold them for $50,000, which was a pretty good deal for 1 month's worth of work. And then I started to travel around the world, going to all the bad places they didn't want to go. So I went to Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, and I went to Afghanistan, and I went to Uganda and found the index case for AIDS. And slowly over time, I began to understand how you could work by yourself with a small camera. And it was pretty good, it was pretty fulfilling, and it was very inexpensive. And then I met a Swedish billionaire named Jan Stenbeck, who was sort of the Ted Turner of Scandinavia, and he was starting the first commercial television networks in Scandinavia, and he invited me to come to Stockholm, and he saw the economics of what I was doing. I hadn't really seen it from an economic point of view, I saw it only from the purity of the journalism. And he asked me a seminal question in 1989 and 1990 that changed my life. He said to me, "Can you teach other people how to do this?" And I said to him what I say to everyone for the last 20 years, any idiot can do this. Making television is not hard, it is not complicated, it is not difficult. The technology, and especially the technology now, makes it absolutely simple. So Stenbeck set up a business with me, and we started to build small local TV news stations across Scandinavia for his network TV3, TV3 Sweden, TV3 Norway, TV3 Denmark. We get 30 young journalists, we gave them each cameras, we taught them to edit, and we ran the TV stations like a newspaper. And as you know, for you work in newspapers, here's your camera, there's the door, see you at 6. And that's all we did. And of course, by putting 30 cameras on the streets of Oslo, or Stockholm, or Bergen, or Stavanger, or any place else, we dominated the media immediately, because nobody does that. That model was then reproduced for New York One, which you may be familiar with. I did Channel 1 here with Associated Newspapers, which David English, very smart guy, a little ahead of his time, because they didn't have the distribution. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, and then the United States. So that was in itself a business. We go into newsrooms, and we still do this now. We go into television newsrooms. A typical local TV newsroom in the United States has 250 or 300 employees. They put 8 camera crews on the street, which is an act of insanity. If you ran newspapers and you had 300 employees and you put 8 pencils on the street, you would produce the same kind of crap that local news in the United States does, which is absolutely true. So we find a place, we find 50 journalists inside, or 40 journalists. We gave them each cameras, we gave them laptops, we said, here's how you shoot, here's how you cut. We went from 8 cameras to 50 cameras, 8 edit rooms to 50 edit rooms, and then we got rid of half the staff, because you don't need them. As the newspapers and magazines began to go to the web, and as the web went to video, suddenly there was an appetite for video online. You all know it already. And so the question is, how do you make it? How do you make it to get to the price point? Well, you can't make it by hiring cameramen, soundmen, producers, editors, or crews. Your newspapers, your magazines, and your television stations are magnets for talented people. That's why they're there. They're journalists. As Paul Taker said last night, journalists aren't made, they're born. And so what you've created with your newspapers is magnets where people who want to be journalists show up. What they're lacking is the tool. The tool here is a digital machine. Your reporters don't go out and they make paper with a piece of paper and a pencil. We give them a camera, a small camera. We don't make them into filmmakers. We teach them to use the small camera as a digital acquisition tool, to go out and find the stories, to get the pictures, to shoot the video. They're not making movies, they're not making television, it's something entirely new. So our client base now runs the spectrum from television stations and broadcasters and networks all over the world to newspapers and magazines and also websites who believe they must have video. And you must have video. As the web goes to video, and you go to video because you go to the web because that's where you are, because that's the platform of distribution, there's a kind of Gresham's law that kicks in. And that says more dynamic media drive out the less dynamic media. If you only have print on your site, and you only have stills, and your competitor has video, you're going to get eaten. But it is not expensive, it is not difficult, it is not complicated to make video. That's the whole point of this thing. For 20 years, I've been working with broadcasters all over the world, including the BBC, where I spent 5 years, including the Voice of America, including all kinds of major broadcasters in the United States and Asia. The point of this is television and video are not expensive to make. They are not complicated to make. It is extremely simple. And the technology makes it easier and easier every day, and less expensive. Broadcast quality cameras, which were once the size of a toaster or a house, and sat on your shoulder and cost $80,000, now are this big, it's HD TV, they cost $800, they're point and shoot, any idiot can operate. It's just point, no seriously, it's all completely automatic. You don't worry about the audio, you don't worry about anything. Edit systems, when I began in this business, an edit suite, a CMX edit suite was $500,000. It was incredibly complicated, it was the size of a room. You sat there with a technician and you said, put it in dissolve, and he went like this, things spun around, and lights went back and forth, and meters went like this, and who the hell knows what he was doing. Today, with Final Cut Pro on a Mac laptop, a 9-year-old can edit professional material. So the cost of making video is effectively zero, or next to zero. The problem that you're encountering is you've come up against a new technology and you don't like it, but you have to deal with it. Do you ever hear the expression, necessity is the mother of invention? Yes, right. You say that in England? Yes. They're not very responsive here, are they?
They will be.
Okay, we'll get to that. That expression is bullshit, or bollocks. I'm learning. It's bullshit because nobody really wants a new invention. None of you guys in the newspaper business were sitting there for 20 years going, shit, we really need an internet. I wish somebody would invent that. Because when the internet came along, let's be honest, you went, fuck, get that thing out of here. Because it messes up your business. Well, that's true. It's not just you. Every time a new technology comes along, it does mess up your business. Nobody really wants them. It's how you respond to it now that's the real test of whether you'll survive or you won't. In the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries, New Bedford, Massachusetts was the wealthiest city in North America. Did you ever hear of New Bedford? No. If you read Moby Dick, right? That's where it takes place. Because New Bedford was the capital of whaling. And Wales is where oil came from. And oil fed the lamps of China and Europe and the United States. It was a big business. So these guys built whaling ships that were bigger and more sophisticated, and sharper harpoons, and better technology to rend the oil well. And they went to the Arctic, and they went to the Pacific, and they went all over the world hunting these whales, and they were the Dubai of the 19th century. Then in 1852, oil was struck in Titusville, Pennsylvania. Suddenly, you didn't have to go to the Arctic to get oil. You could get it just down the street, just drilling a little hole. Well, the sea captains and the oilmen in New Bedford didn't get it. They believed they were in the whaling business. And so they all went broke. And today, New Bedford's a crippled little town in New England. They weren't in the whaling business, they were in the oil business. What their clients wanted was the oil. They didn't give a crap where it came from. So if they'd been smart, they would have packed up and sold the boats and headed for Titusville and been the John D. Rockefellers of the 20th century, because they were there. And they were in better position than Rockefeller was because they had the distribution in place already and everybody knew them for the oil. But they couldn't bring themselves to do it. They couldn't bring themselves to do it because they were frightened. They were frightened they'd lose the ships. Well, you know what? They were going to lose the ships. You are not in the newspaper business. You are in the business of going into your communities, finding stories and information, processing them, making them trustworthy, and delivering them back to your clients and charging advertisers for those eyeballs. When a new technology like the internet comes along, you can either hide from it. You can say, well, you know, maybe I'm not sure, a couple of people in the basement will try this and we'll see if it works. Or you can embrace it. Embracing it is really important. How much time I got?